The air in Detroit's Carver Heights, a battered pocket of the city's west side, hung thick with diesel fumes and the faint tang of burnt rubber on November 10th, 2024. Marcus Tate, 38, stood in the grease-slicked bay of Tate's Auto Fix, his small repair shop on Livernois Avenue, his hands steady as he wrestled a rusted alternator from a '98 Chevy Impala. A black man with a broad frame and a faded scar across his left cheek, Marcus had lived in Carver Heights his whole life, his deep-set eyes carrying the weight of a man who'd seen too much. Detroit, a city of 620,000, sprawled around him, its abandoned lots and boarded-up homes a testament to decay. But Carver Heights was a world apart, a ghetto where survival was a daily grind, and racism was a blade that cut in ways both subtle and brutal. Marcus had built his shop from nothing, a flicker of defiance in a neighborhood ruled by gangs and suspicion. But the cost was steep, and the streets never let him forget who he was. Tate's Auto Fix was a lifeline, its two bays cluttered with tools, oil drums, and a flickering neon sign that read, "Open." Marcus ran it alone, save for his cousin Jamal, 22, who swept floors and handled small jobs, and his sister Keisha, 35, who kept the books part-time. The shop was a haven for locals needing cheap fixes. Old sedans, rusted pickups, cars barely holding together. But it was also a target. Customers like Ron Delaney, a white landlord from the suburbs, often haggled prices, his tone sharp with distrust. "You sure this ain't a ripoff, Marcus?" he'd say, eyeing the shop like it was a trap. Cops, like Officer Greg Walsh, patrolled Livernois with heavy hands, their stops at the shop more harassment than routine, their glances at Marcus loaded with troublemaker. The local gang, the Red Claws, led by a wiry thug named Dre, demanded protection fees, their presence a constant shadow. Last week, a white delivery driver had refused to unload parts, muttering, "I don't deal with this hood." Marcus gritted his teeth, needing the business, but each slight was a spark, smoldering in the tinder of Carver Heights. Today, as Marcus torqued a bolt, Ron rolled in, his SUV gleaming against the shop's grime. "My brakes are squealing," he said, tossing keys on the counter, his eyes scanning Marcus like he was sizing up a threat. "You better not overcharge me." Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd quoted Ron $200, half the chain shop rate. "I'll check it, Ron. Fair price," he said, his voice even, though his grip on the wrench whitened his knuckles. Ron's smirk said he doubted it. "Make it quick. I don't like waiting in this dump." The word dump was a jab, a code Marcus knew. Black, Carver Heights, not worthy. He diagnosed a worn rotor, replaced it for $180, but Ron paid exact change, muttering, "Better not break down," and peeled out, leaving Marcus with a $20 loss after labor. At noon, Marcus ate a sandwich Keisha had left, sitting on a crate in the back, the shop's radio crackling with static. Jamal, wiping sweat from his brow, leaned in. "Ron's a prick, man. Same as Walsh. Stopped me yesterday, asked if I was carrying." Marcus sighed, their shared weight heavy. Keisha faced it too. Her temp job at a downtown office cut hours, the manager citing fit, her blackness a silent mark. Marcus's nephew Ty, 15, who hung around the shop, had mentioned a classmate, Ethan, shoving him at school, his ghetto jab a daily sting. Marcus taught him to keep his head up, but the sparks were piling, and Carver Heights was a powder keg. That afternoon, Dre and two Red Claws, their red bandanas bright against faded hoodies, slunk into the shop, their eyes glinting with menace. "Rent's due, Tate," Dre said, leaning on a toolbox, his knife's handle visible. Marcus's pulse spiked. He'd paid $300 last month, half his profit. "I paid, Dre. We're square," he said, his voice low, his hand inching toward a crowbar under the counter. Dre's laugh was cold. "Price went up. 500 or we got problems." The threat hung heavy, Jamal stiffening, Ty watching wide-eyed from the corner. Marcus stared Dre down, his scar twitching, but handed over $400, the last of his cash. Dre smirked, pocketing it. "Smart man. Keep it that way." They left, the air thicker, the shop's survival a coin toss. At home, a sagging duplex on Dexter Street, Marcus cooked rice while Keisha studied for a certification. Rabia, braiding Kiana's hair, spoke softly. "We need cameras, Des, like Aisha's library." Desmond agreed, but dread crept in. Cameras cost money, and the garage's profits were thin, stretched by rent, Kiana's school fees, Marla's salon supplies. Ty said Ethan's crew jumped him after school, his hood rat slur bruising more than the punches. Cops didn't care, Ty muttered, showing a split lip. Said I started it. Keisha's hours were cut again, her managers restructuring a lie. It's a trap, Marcus said, his voice low, his hands clenching a spatula. No threats, just walls. On November 11th, the pressure surged. Arif met a local construction firm, hoping to supply radios, but the owner tied to Ron declined, citing existing vendors. At school, Noor's art project was ignored, Ethan showcased, the teacher citing style. Hamza's soccer coach benched him. For a season, Ethan's team vibe excuse unchecked. Rabia's admin job eliminated her role, the manager citing downsizing. It's a chokehold, Arif said, his voice low, his hands gripping a mug as he sat in the shop, the faint scent of chai now ash. The shop had weeks left, and Chatham's fog was a noose. That night, Marcus stood in Tate's Auto Fix, the bays dark, Keisha, Jamal, and Ty beside him. A photo Ty drew, a shop with a star, hung on the wall. The slights, the fists, the squeeze, they'd scarred them, but so had Keisha's grit, Jamal's loyalty, Ty's defiance, a neighbor's nod. They'd survived in the chaos, no plans, no heroes, and held their ground. Marcus touched the counter, its wood a pulse, and whispered, "This is our fight, our home. Share it, carry it, let it burn through every ash." He saw others, families like his, battered but fierce, holding their story, passing it like a spark to light every corner, a flame no hate could quench. The dusk of November 12th, 2024, settled over Carver Heights, Detroit, like a bruise. The sodium streetlights flickering on Livernois Avenue, casting jagged shadows across the cracked pavement outside Tate's Auto Fix. Marcus Tate, 38, leaned over a battered Honda Civic in the shop's grease-slicked bay, his broad frame tense as he replaced a timing belt, the clank of his ratchet a fleeting anchor against the chaos threatening to swallow his world. A black man with a scar tracing his cheek, Marcus had carved Tate's Auto Fix from the bones of this ghetto, a stubborn act of defiance in a neighborhood ruled by the Red Claws gang and the heavy boots of cops like Officer Greg Walsh. But the cost was brutal. Carver Heights didn't forgive, and racism was a blade that cut through every move he made, from clients to cops to the streets that never slept. The shop was a lifeline, its two bays cluttered with tools, oil cans, and a neon sign that buzzed open despite the odds. Marcus ran it with his cousin Jamal, 22, who handled oil changes and kept the floor clean, and his sister Keisha, 35, who juggled the books between temp jobs. The place was a refuge for locals needing cheap fixes, cars held together by duct tape and prayer, but it was also a target. White clients like Ron Delaney haggled with distrust, their "you sure" a constant jab. Cops like Walsh rolled by daily, their routine checks a ritual of harassment, their eyes screaming trouble. The Red Claws, led by Dre, a wiry predator with a knife, squeezed protection fees, their threats a noose tightening each week. Yesterday, Dre's crew had taken $400, leaving Marcus's cash drawer empty, and Ron had stiffed him on a brake job, the shop's revenue now a $3,000 monthly shortfall. Today, as Marcus tightened a bolt, Walsh's cruiser pulled up, its lights flashing red and blue against the shop's grimy windows. Walsh, a stocky white cop with a buzz cut, swaggered in, his hand on his holster. "Tate, got a tip about stolen parts," he said, his voice dripping with accusation, his eyes scanning the bay like a hawk. Marcus's pulse spiked. He'd bought every part legit, receipts filed. "Ain't no stolen nothing here," he said, his voice low, wiping his hands on a rag. Walsh smirked, kicking a tire. "We'll see. Keep it clean, boy." The word boy was a slap, a code Marcus knew. Black, Carver Heights, always suspect. Walsh lingered, rifling through a toolbox, finding nothing, then left, his cruiser idling outside for an hour, scaring off a client. Marcus's hands shook as he resumed work, the shop's survival a coin toss. At 3 p.m., Jamal burst in, his face bruised, his lip bleeding. "Red Claws jumped me," he said, his voice tight, clutching his side. "Dre's boys said we owe more." Marcus's blood boiled. Dre's crew had hit Jamal behind the liquor store, a block away, their fists a message for Marcus. "You okay?" Marcus asked, his voice low, checking Jamal's ribs, bruised, not broken. Jamal nodded, but his eyes were haunted. They want $600 by Friday, or they're coming here. Marcus clenched his jaw, the shop's cash down to $200, the weight of Dre's knife a shadow that never left. He sent Jamal home, his mind racing, but the streets offered no mercy, and Carver Heights was a cage. That evening, Keisha arrived, her temp jobs hours cut again, her manager's budget cuts a lie. "They don't want me there," she said, her voice bitter, sorting invoices. Ty, Marcus's 15-year-old nephew, slunk in, his hoodie torn, his eye swollen. "Ethan's crew jumped me again," he said, his voice raw, showing a cut from a ring. "Called me ghetto trash." Marcus's fist clenched. Ethan, a white kid from the edge of the Heights, ran with a crew that targeted Ty. Their hood rat slurs a daily ritual, unchecked by teachers or cops. Marcus taught Ty to dodge, but the fights were a tide, and Carver Heights was a war zone. At home, a duplex on Dexter Street with peeling paint and a creaking porch. Marcus fried chicken, the sizzle a brief distraction. Keisha, studying for a certification, shared another blow. Her job was now one shift a week, the manager citing team fit. Ty said Ethan's crew trashed his locker, his nigger slur scrawled inside, the school doing nothing. "Cops laughed," Ty muttered, his knuckles raw. Marcus's heart sank. The pattern was a noose, tightening with every jab, every fist. Ron, Walsh, Dre, Ethan, they were a web, their racism a blade that cut deeper each day. The shop was weeks from folding, and the streets were a furnace ready to ignite. On November 13th, the tension snapped. Marcus was closing the shop when Dre's crew, 3 Red Claws, their bandanas red flags, cornered him in the alley behind the shop. "Where's my money, Tate?" Dre snarled, his knife glinting, his boys cracking knuckles. Marcus stood tall, his scar twitching, his crowbar hidden behind his back. "I paid," he said, his voice steel. Dre lunged, his blade slashing Marcus's arm, blood welling. Marcus swung the crowbar, cracking Dre's wrist, the knife clattering. The others charged, fists flying, boots slamming Marcus's ribs. He fought back, landing a punch that bloodied one thug's nose, but a kick to his knee dropped him. Jamal, hearing the noise, rushed out, swinging a tire iron, scattering the crew. Dre fled, spitting, "You're dead, Tate!" Marcus staggered up, his arm bleeding, ribs bruised, the shop's door dented from a stray kick. The fight left Marcus shaken, the shop's cash gone, stolen in the chaos. Keisha patched his arm, her hands trembling. "We can't keep this up," she whispered, her eyes wet. Ty watched, his face hard, his fists clenched. Marcus nodded, his resolve a fraying thread, the shop's future a flicker in a storm. They were black. Carver Heights was their cage, and the streets were a spark waiting to burn. The night of November 14, 2024, cloaked Carver Heights, Detroit, in a suffocating darkness. The streetlights on Livernois Avenue spitting weak orange glows that barely pierced the fog rolling off the St. Clair River. Marcus Tate, 38, stood in the dim bay of Tate's Auto Fix, his repair shop a battered fortress against the chaos of the ghetto. His broad frame, scarred cheek, and calloused hands were taut as he rebuilt a carburetor on a 02 Pontiac, the clank of his wrench a fleeting pulse in a neighborhood that pulsed with danger. A black man born and forged in Carver Heights, Marcus had poured his soul into the shop. But the streets didn't care. Racism and violence were the air he breathed. And the Red Claws gang, cops like Officer Greg Walsh, and white clients like Ron Delaney were the blades carving at his life. 2 days ago, Dre's crew had jumped him in the alley, their fists and knife leaving his arm bandaged and ribs bruised, stealing his last $400. The shop was bleeding, its cash gone, and Carver Heights was a furnace, its sparks ready to ignite. Tate's Auto Fix was a lifeline on life support, its 2 bays littered with rusted tools, oil stains, and a neon sign that flickered like a dying star. Marcus ran it with his cousin Jamal, 22, who nursed a bruised jaw from his own run-in with the Red Claws, and his sister Keisha, 35, who juggled the books between temp jobs now cut to scraps. The shop fixed cars for locals, beaters barely roadworthy, but it was a magnet for trouble. Ron Delaney and other white clients haggled with sneers, their "You sure you know this?" a constant gut punch. Walsh's checks were shakedowns, his boy a racist whip. The Red Claws, led by Dre, a lean predator with a blade, demanded $600 by Friday, their threats a noose that tightened daily. Last night, a white supplier tied to Ron's network shorted an oil filter order, muttering, This hood's a risk. Marcus swallowed it, needing the parts, but the sparks were piling, and the shop was a tinderbox. Today, as Marcus torqued a bolt, Walsh's cruiser rolled up, its light slicing through the shop's grime-streaked windows. Walsh, flanked by a rookie cop, strode in, his buzz cut glinting, his hand on his baton. "Tate, heard you're fencing stolen cars," he said, his voice a taunt, his eyes raking the bay. Marcus's blood surged. He'd never touched a hot car, every VIN logged. "Nothing stolen here," he said, his voice low, setting down his wrench, his bandaged arm throbbing. Walsh's smirk was a blade. "We'll see, thug." The word thug was a lash, a code Marcus knew. Black, Carver Heights, guilty by default. Walsh kicked over a stack of tires, the rookie rifling through a shelf, finding nothing but grease. "Stay out of trouble," Walsh spat, slamming the door, his cruiser lingering outside, scaring off two clients. Marcus's fists clenched, his ribs aching, the shop's survival a dice roll. At 4 p.m., Keisha burst in, her temp job gone, the manager's downsizing a lie. "They don't want me," she said, her voice raw, tossing her bag on a crate. Jamal, still limping from his beating, muttered, "Dre's boys followed me home, said we're late." Marcus's pulse hammered. The Red Claw's $600 demand was a death sentence, the shop's till empty. Ty, Marcus's 15-year-old nephew, slunk in, his face bloodied, his hoodie ripped. "Ethan's crew jumped me at the park," he said, his voice shaking, showing a gash from a bottle. "Called me nigger, said I don't belong." Marcus's vision blurred. Ethan's white crew, emboldened by their dad's ties to Ron, hunted Ty like prey, their slurs a daily ritual, school and cops turning a blind eye. Marcus patched Ty's cut, his voice low. "Stay close, Ty." But the streets were a meat grinder, and Carver Heights offered no mercy. That night, trouble boiled over. Marcus was locking the shop when Dre's crew, 4 Red Claws, their bandanas like bloodstains, blocked the alley, Dre's knife glinting under a streetlight. "Time's up, Tate," Dre snarled, his boys circling, one cracking a pipe against his palm. 600 or this shop's done." Marcus stood tall, his scar pulsing, his crowbar gripped behind his back. "I paid," he said, his voice steel, blood seeping through his bandage. Dre laughed, lunging with his knife, aiming for Marcus's chest. Marcus dodged, swinging the crowbar, smashing Dre's shoulder, the crack of bone echoing. The others charged, a pipe grazing Marcus's skull, fists slamming his jaw. He fought back, his punch splitting one thug's lip, his kick dropping another. Jamal, hearing the chaos, rushed out, tackling a Claws member, his tire iron swinging. Ty, against orders, threw a brick, clipping a thug's head. The fight was a blur of blood and grunts, Dre's crew retreating, one spitting, "You're burned, Tate." Marcus staggered, his face bruised, arm bleeding fresh, the alley littered with glass and a broken pipe. The brawl left the shop's back door splintered, a toolbox smashed, and Marcus's cash box empty. Another $150 stolen. Keisha, stitching a cut on Jamal's brow, whispered, "We're done, Marcus." Ty, his hands shaking, clutched a rag, his eyes hard. Marcus's ribs screamed, his vision swimming, but he stood, his voice a growl. "We ain't done." The shop had days left, the Red Claw's threat a ticking bomb, and Walsh's cruiser still prowled. Carver Heights was a pyre, and the flames were close, the air thick with the promise of ash. The dawn of November 16, 2024, broke over Carver Heights, Detroit, with a sickly orange glow, the air thick with the stench of burnt oil and the distant wail of sirens cutting through the fog. Marcus Tate, 38, stood in the battered bay of Tate's Auto Fix, his repair shop on Livernois Avenue, his broad frame hunched as he patched a radiator, his scarred cheek twitching with every clank of his wrench. A black man forged in the crucible of this ghetto, Marcus had poured his life into the shop, but the streets of Carver Heights were a meat grinder, and racism was the blade that carved at him through the Red Claws gang's fists. Officer Greg Walsh's, baton and white clients like Ron Delaney's sneers. 3 days ago, Dre's crew had jumped him, their knife slicing his arm, their boots bruising his ribs, stealing his last cash. The shop was a husk, its till empty, and the neighborhood was a pyre, its flames licking closer with every breath. Tate's Auto Fix was a dying ember, its 2 bays cluttered with broken tools, oil drums, and a neon sign that flickered like a heartbeat on its last pulse. Marcus ran it with his cousin Jamal, 22, his face still swollen from a Red Claws beating, and his sister Keisha, 35, whose temp job was now gone, her bookkeeping the only thread holding the shop's finances together. The place was a lifeline for locals, cars patched with grit and ingenuity, but it was a lightning rod for trouble. Ron's "You sure?" jabs were a daily gut punch. Walsh's "thug" a racist lash, and the Red Claw's $600 demand due tomorrow was a death sentence. Yesterday, a white parts supplier, tied to Ron's network, refused delivery, muttering, "Too risky for this hood." Marcus took it, needing the stock, but the shop was weeks from folding, and Carver Heights was a furnace, its sparks now ablaze. Today, as Marcus wrestled a spark plug, Walsh's cruiser screeched up, its lights painting the shop's grime red and blue. Walsh, his buzz cut glinting, stormed in with two cops, their batons drawn. "Tate, you're dealing drugs now?" Walsh snarled, his voice a taunt, his eyes raking the bay. Marcus's blood roared. Every gram in the shop was oil or grease, his receipts clean. "Ain't no drugs," he said, his voice low, his bandaged arm throbbing, his ribs screaming from the last fight. Walsh's smirk was a knife. "We'll tear this dump apart." The word dump was a lash, a code Marcus knew, black Carver Heights, always guilty. The cops trashed a shelf, spilling tools, smashing a headlight, finding nothing. Walsh slammed Marcus against the wall, his baton grazing his jaw. "You're on borrowed time, boy," he spat, the rookie cuffing Jamal for resisting when he protested. They left, dragging Jamal to the cruiser, releasing him blocks away with a bloody nose. Marcus's vision blurred, his fists clenched, the shop's survival a coin flip. At 5 p.m., Keisha arrived, her eyes red from a job rejection, the manager's "not a fit" a lie. "They see my skin and run," she said, her voice raw, sorting receipts. Ty, Marcus's 15-year-old nephew, limped in, his face a map of bruises, his arm cut from a glass shard. "Ethan's crew got me at the corner," he said, his voice shaking, showing a gash from a broken bottle. "Called me ghetto trash, said I'm nothing." Marcus's heart cracked. Ethan's white crew, backed by their dad's ties to Ron, hunted Ty like dogs, their slurs a ritual, school and cops blind. Marcus taped Ty's cut, his voice low. "You're enough, Ty." But the streets were a slaughterhouse, and Carver Heights offered no quarter. Culmination. That night, the pyre ignited. Marcus was closing the shop, the bays dark, when Dre's crew, 6 Red Claws, their bandanas like blood in the gloom, swarmed the alley, Dre's knife gleaming, a Molotov cocktail in his hand. "You're done, Tate," Dre roared, his boys wielding pipes and chains. "No cash, no shop." Marcus gripped his crowbar, his scar pulsing, his body a map of bruises. "Back off," he growled, his voice steel, Jamal and Ty at his side, clutching a tire iron and a brick. Dre laughed, tossing the Molotov, the bottle shattering against the shop's door, flames erupting with a whoosh, licking the walls. The crew charged, pipes swinging, chains rattling. Marcus swung his crowbar, cracking a thug's arm, blood spraying. Jamal tackled another, his tire iron smashing a knee. Ty threw his brick, missing, but Dre's knife slashed Jamal's shoulder, blood soaking his shirt. Marcus roared, his fist breaking Dre's nose, but a chain caught his ribs, dropping him to his knees. The fire spread, smoke choking the air, the shop's sign melting. Keisha, hearing the chaos, ran out, swinging a wrench, scattering a Claws member. Ty dragged Jamal back, his shoulder bleeding as Marcus staggered up, landing a final punch that sent Dre sprawling. The blaze roared, flames consuming the shop's front, tires popping in the heat. Sirens wailed, fire trucks arriving, but the Red Claws vanished into the fog. Walsh's cruiser rolled up, his smirk cold. "Your fault, Tate," he said, his baton tapping, doing nothing as the fire crew fought the flames. The shop was gutted, its bays charred, tools ash, $10,000 in damage. Marcus stood, bloodied, his arm burned, ribs cracked, Jamal leaning on him, Keisha and Ty beside him, their faces streaked with soot. The shop was a ruin, but they were alive. Their fight a raw, unscripted refusal to break. On November 17th, Marcus sat in the duplex on Dexter Street, the air heavy with smoke and loss. Keisha bandaged Jamal's shoulder, Ty cleaned his cuts, their eyes hard but unbroken. A neighbor, Miss Clara, brought coffee, her nod a rare warmth. A client, old Mr. Jenkins, promised to spread word for repairs at Marcus's home bay. Ty's substitute teacher gave him a passing grade, a small shield against Ethan's crew. The shop was ash, but Marcus's hands were iron, his family a fortress. He touched the photo Ty drew, a shop with a star, now singed, and whispered, "This is our fight, our blood. Share it, carry it, let it blaze through every ash." He saw others, souls like his, scarred but fierce, holding their story, passing it like a torch to light every ruin, a flame no hate could kill.